Hello and welcome to what was supposed to be the second episode of the Night Watchman Cricket Podcast, focused on the subreddit of cricket. Now, unfortunately, the Night Watchman Podcast has been taken, and we found this out by doing a simple Google search of the name. And sadly, every other cricketing pun has been taken as well. Every other cricketing field position has also been taken. So we thought long and hard and found that the term Innings Break was free. So we are now renaming ourselves the Innings Break Podcast. So welcome to episode 2 of the Innings Break Podcast. So, first of all, let's start this week off by talking about a very juicy shitpost on our sub, and I'm going to hand over to my co-host, Angry Lettuce, to talk about it.
Thanks, Rav. Our shitpost of the week is Ravi Ashwin on the troll, marking a year since he ran out of Joss Butler with helping us all remember of lockdown. Don't wander out, stay inside, stay safe. This classic from, it was last year's IPL, wasn't it? Of him running out Joss Butler, and then with the subsequent fallout of Mancadding and the forever ongoing debate of whether it's good sportsmanship or not. Jamie Anderson was fairly vocal at the time with it, was shredding a photo of Ravi. What are your guys' thoughts on it?
I was pretty hurt, to be honest with you, because, you know, just imagine if someone took a picture of you and shredded it and put it on Twitter. It's not very nice, is it? But I can also understand that it's a bit cheeky, and if I was run out to be by Mancadding, I would be upset with that. So I see both sides of it.
I'm surprised how it became more of an international affair than just being IPL. I know IPL is very global, but it very much sounded, or like a lot of people trying to defend from Ashwin, like from nation point of view, and a lot of people were against, like from a different nation. And it could be me, like sitting away, not getting the complete gist of it. But I felt it got divided. It became more of a cricket politicized rather than actually the issue, what it is was. So that's one point which I feel like that was a wrong outcome of it. But in my opinion, I mean, it is okay. It's if it is within the rule. I mean, everybody knows the rule, and everybody tries to use it. And that's right. I mean, a lot of bowlers have been penalized by just giving restrictions, smaller grounds, good juicy pitches to hit sixes and boundaries. I think they also need some ammos to try on their side as well. So that's my opinion.
Yep, good point. I think that bowlers have had it pretty rough. You know, the introduction of free hit like last decade, and then that was a T20 thing, then it got moved to ODIs, and, you know, it is very much a batsman's game now with all the power plays and stuff like that. So I like that school of thought. They should be given some leeway and some control over it. I do agree that it was becoming a national event. It was very, very well publicized. Every single big name on Twitter cricket had, like, an opinion on it, and I'm sure loads of people on our subreddit I remember actually had very, very differing opinions on it as well.
I personally, I mean, if it's the point of Mancadding, it's like I personally try to make sure when I'm like about to run, I run like along with bowlers to disturb their rhythm as well, and then like make sure I don't leave the crease until they have delivered it. So bowlers are typically pissed off with that when I play, and this is just to make sure that they don't get disadvantage.
Yeah, it's such a batsman's game, I think, especially T20. I don't really have a problem with Mancadding, to be honest. I think it's a lot of the English media, especially, very against it, as it's kind of against the spirit of cricket. But ultimately, the batsman's trying to get a leeway.
Right.
It's no different from running a run short. I think what's probably fair is to give them a warning, and if they do it again, I don't see a problem. It was your fault. You've been run out. It's like it happened in the Women's T20 World Cup, England versus South Africa. Catherine Brunt threatened to run her opponent out just before South Africa won. So yeah, I don't have a problem with trying to give them a warning. If they reject the warning, well, sucks to be you.
Yeah. One interesting example I think we can draw from another sport is, and Wicketkeeper may be able to tell us more because he's from America, but in baseball, if you're trying to like steal a run, or if you're caught like off your base, like it's very much fair game to try and run you out. So it does add a bit of excitement as well. If you want to take the risk, then you might get a reward of getting a quick single, but you have the risk of getting out. So yeah, very interesting topic indeed.
No, unless it was a shit post, I think the idea was what Ashwin wants to give was like stay indoor. India had just started a 21-day lockdown, a national lockdown, like not to go out. And I think it was his cheeky way of presenting his point, stay inside.
I mean, he has a wonderful ethical mind, as we all know. So
I know.
Yeah, I mean, he's just doing what good guys do. So well done, Mr. Ashwin.
All-round good bloke Ashwin. Who would have thought that this would be the first topic of the Innings Break Podcast?
Indeed.
All right, moving on. I think enough of Mr. Ashwin. I think we can move to our stat post of the week. Now, this is a new segment that we are planning to have mostly on this podcast. And considering that cricket is such a statistician haven, that we have so much data to be collected on this game and such a long game. So all the statisticians spend day and night there. And I know on our Reddit, we have so many statisticians trying to utilize this lockdown time, this downtime. And one of them was Mr. TheFedoraKnight. I think it's Mr. or Miss. I'm assuming it's Mr. And it was an interesting post. It probably came out on 2nd April UTC. And the topic was the recent decline of the test match batting. Now, what this person has done was he tried to look at over 5 period from 2005 till now. And in each 5 periods, he observed that around 40 players who have their averages above 40. That's coincident. So there are 43 in 2010 to 2015, 42 in 2005 to 2010, and 43 in 2000 to 2005. So his interesting opinion or his observation was in last 5 years, there are only 25 players or batsmen who have their averages above 40. Now, that was an open question for folks to discuss, and they did. What could be the reason? A lot of people talking about is the pitch has become more bowler friendly. Has the skills improved in bowling department, or batting department has it dropped? So I did look at it. I tried to be analyst myself on this. And one thing which probably a lot of people did not thought of was the mindset. The mindset of batting has changed, especially after advent of T20, where a lot of people don't grow up with the same mindset of playing longer innings, playing a balanced inning, and they prefer their natural talent, their practice growing up is a T20 style game. And that's what my thinking is, that a lot of people don't play with test match mindset, and they are very few guys who are playing test matches with a stable inning mindset. Also, another thing I did not get a chance to look into it, I feel that now we have more T20 and one-day games than test matches. So, of course, you don't get an opportunity to play games. You will probably you won't have that many people playing with 40 plus average. There are a lot of other things as well, but I'll let other guys talk about it. But what do you guys think?
Do you think that necessarily, if you don't go in with a defensive mindset, that will reduce your average? Because, I mean, that is a common belief that a lot of people have. But perhaps if your natural game is to play aggressive, then if you have a faulty defensive technique, then perhaps, playing aggressively will actually increase your average. So I don't know if I see that as an argument on the whole. But
yeah, I think, and I think here the way we calculate average in cricket is also in the game. The way we calculate average is by the number of dismissals. That's your
not
denominator,
outs,
right?
Yeah, so not
So
outs.
so if you are not out, if you played the whole game without losing your wicket, you get an advantage of it, which is kind of cheeky. But if folks are playing, even if you score 100, you probably will get an out, and then you'll probably ultimately get that one addition to your denominator, which is reducing your average. If somebody scored 63 times without getting out, that person's average has gone significantly by a person who got out after 100.
Yeah.
So that is, I feel like that. Like if somebody is scoring, like Rishabh Pant, I know in Australia, he scored a century, but a quick century, but ultimately, like, he was, in my opinion, he was lucky several times. Like, he didn't lose his wicket, but there were times, if he would have lost wicket, his average would have gone down again. So ultimately he got out, and then he probably lost that opportunity of staying not out.
On your point, Rav, on aggressive play to play Test cricket, I think David Warner would be a pretty good example, as long as Stuart Broad isn't coming around the wicket to him. He plays the game extremely aggressively. He's hit a century in the first innings, in the first session of a first innings. Super aggressive batsman, but ultimately he does have a defensive game and he can grind it out as well. But there's not many players who can. Look at the summer that was in 2019. Johnny Bairstow and Jason Roy, arguably the two best ODI openers in the game. And they were
for England. Let's make it very clear. Rohit Sharma, Shikhar Dhawan.
I said arguably.
Okay. That's another debate. You guys discuss that in the comments.
Arguably, the best one-day openers, and yet Jason Roy completely exposed by the red ball, any movement, and these players, Johnny Bairstow, he used to be able to play red ball cricket but can't anymore. Bats aren't straight, defensive technique gone, and they're both bowled between bat pads continuously. So yes, aggressive play can still be in the game, but there's not many players who can.
Right. That's a fair point, and I think definitely taking that on board. So some of the points of discussion on this post were really interesting, and one of them was, are pitches more bowler friendly? Now, from my perspective, I think that in the past few years, in India, for example, their pitches have turned from becoming spin friendly to just becoming more neutral pitches where, pace bowlers get a lot out of it. So, I'm not sure if bowler friendly is the correct term, but there definitely has been changes. But abroad, I think there's a lot more emphasis on the pitch than there used to be, as in outside of Asia. But that's just my perspective. Maybe I'm being very, very one-sided.
Maybe, pitch could be a factor, but I think bowlers' skills has made a lot of change. Previously, it was only Australia and Pakistan who had great fast bowlers, right? Now you can see almost every team has a great fast bowler. I won't say just few teams, but you can think every nation who is playing pretty good these days, and it is because good fast bowling side, and that's probably the other team, what they used to capitalize is missing, right? Okay, hitting the bowlers which were like average, medium pace bowlers, which claims to be fast bowlers. Now that were being thrown all over apart. Now it's like, okay, they have to make sure ball is moving. Also, the pace has gone significantly up. So that has changed. And I think this is just considering that the OP had only done the analysis from 2000 onwards. I'm sure if you go back in West Indies, when West Indies was at its peak, it was difficult to score against them. So
yeah,
that has changed a lot. Finally, the teams have invested in their fast bowlers. They have talent scouts going out to try to find the good bowlers and then try to invest into it. those guys getting good medical attention. I think that's another thing, because previously, and that's one of the complaints for all the fast bowlers. I think if you talk to them and you hear their interviews, it's injury. They have an injury scares when they're at peak. And now with sports medicine getting improvement, they can play more, they can improve more, and that's is also contributing to this stat.
So I think that your main argument is that pace bowlers are definitely improving, and more countries have better pace bowlers, and I agree with that. Did you think that there's been a decline in spin bowling and, the kind of threat that poses? Because, no one has a Warne or a Murali or a Kumble to, Ashwin was great, but even his stats have gone down over the past few years. Do you think there's been a decline in spin bowling and that's kind of directed more towards pace?
I think definitely. I think there's the quality of spin bowling's massively reduced. From purely English perspective, Jack Leach is all right. Moeen Ali is either amazing or as soon as his confidence drops, he really drops off a cliff. And then Dom Bess, who he's still very young. And then you look around the world, Nathan Lyon perhaps is the best spinner in the world, perhaps. But that's it really. You can't, as you said, Ravi Ashwin can be great, but he's not probably as good as he once was.
Yeah.
There's Ravi Jadeja, but I don't know, he's more of an all-rounder. I wouldn't say he's necessarily the best spinner in the world.
His record is phenomenal as a bowler, but I do agree, he's very, very one-dimensional. And, on Indian pitches, for whatever reason, he does seem to tear it up quite a bit.
I think the disadvantage with spinner has been that every spinner comes in with their own uniqueness, and that was baffling. Whenever you see a spinner coming up, getting the ranks up, okay, he's the next new big thing. And some batsmen decode the spinner, and then they lose their cutting edge, and that's where that's what's happening. I think that's what happened to Kuldeep. That's probably happening to
the analysis. The analysis probably is much stronger these days, so the preparation and stuff is perhaps a lot better than it used to be. And
one more thing, I want to mention one more very good point, which I also thought, and I think somebody called Shimran Ripley also commented in that the fielding has improved significantly, and that's another big factor, right? There were times where ballers, the fielders, were let it go, where they won't push it even harder, dive it to save those 4 runs, or probably don't run to the boundary to grab the ball and let the batsman run 4 instead of 2, or let them run 5 even at times. I don't remember if I've seen that, but that has changed a lot. I know across the world, across all the big nations, I've seen the fielding standard has improved. People flying around to take catches.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Here's an alternative school of thought. I personally think that this has made a difference, but in terms of the batting lineup, I think that it's more spread out these days. I think there is more onus on the lower middle order and the tail end to contribute. So potentially, that kind of might go towards the aggressive mindset of the top order, that, if we play aggressively and get out, at least our tail is there. For example, I saw Ishant Sharma score a 50. That was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. One of the worst batsmen of all time, he scored a 50. And people, the tail end is contributing more. So, even though individual averages may be going, may not be as high as they once were, perhaps that kind of overall team average may not do that, may not be going down, but that obviously requires some research.
Do you think that's possible? I don't think, because tailenders, they, those are bonus runs. I have always I assume that after number 7, you're 7 down or 8 down, most probably I'm assuming whatever these guys score, that's bonus. And I think they're given a free rein, go and hit it, because you don't want your fast bowlers, if they are coming as a tail-ender, to get tired while batting, and then if they get out, you have to go back and put your whole effort in bowling fast balls. So
yeah. But every team has someone there. Like, for example, with England, when they played against India in England, Tom Curran, like, he literally took away the. Oh, sorry, Sam Curran. Sam Curran, yeah. He literally took away India's victories single-handedly because of the tail and India's inability to dismiss the tail. And then even in India, I remember like Hardik Pandya did well in South Africa, and Jadeja's done well from time to time. I think there could be something, but maybe I'm on my own in that school of thought.
I think so. In the England-South Africa series in January, there was at least one time where our tail put on well over 100. People like Mark Wood I think averaged something silly like 45 for the series. So yeah, the tail is definitely more important. There's a lot less rabbits than there were back in the day. I think nearly everyone can hold a bat rather than people like Phil Tufnell, who it was hysterical to watch him bat.
Yeah, so if you're a bowler, obviously bowling's your primary skill, but you should be expected to have some value with the bat. I think that's a change in mindset which may have contributed to this, but yeah, who knows? I'm sure it's a contribution of many, many things.
There's also balance though against we're probably in the period of one of the greatest batsmen of all time, which is ironic given one of the topics coming up. Steve Smith, he's all right at batting in test matches, isn't he? He's fairly handy with the bat.
Yeah, and his average on its own is pretty remarkable, right?
Almost 70, right? So
I remember, when I saw in Sachin's era, like people were averaging 50, 55, and that was outstanding. And then just like Steve Smith comes along and then just changes everything pretty much.
Well, one more thing I want to point out, which I probably missed in my explanation, like presenting of this topic, was the qualifying player. I think you have to have at least forgot how many. It has a filter of
20 innings.
You should have played minimum of 20 innings played. So you don't see that many people playing. Like for example, Labuschagne, he is up at 63, but he has only played 14 innings. So it's also like very few guys who have played that many innings consistently over 5 years. Yeah,
true. Okay, that was a fascinating post. Thank you very much, Mr. TheFedoraKnight. Very interesting name as well. Yep, so let's move on to the main topic of our show, Sandpapergate, which took place in March 2018. And obviously, because it has crossed the 2-year mark, it has come up quite a bit on our subreddit, and there are plenty of interesting posts on the topic. Now, for those that don't know about Sandpapergate, it took place when Australia were touring South Africa, and Cameron Bancroft was caught on screen with some sandpaper in his pocket, and he was clearly trying to change the condition of the ball. When caught, he then proceeded to put it down his pants, and as a result of that, he was caught by the umpires, and he pretended that nothing had happened. It turned out later, of course, that it was sandpaper. Steve Smith and his team went to the press conference and admitted it, and as a result of that, there was world chaos. And the Australian team were absolutely hounded and criticised by all corners of the globe for how they went about it and the blatant way they tried to hide the sandpaper. What do you guys think of the incident? That'd be pretty interesting to hear.
So let me plug in something to all our listeners. Like here, we are definitely missing an Australian voice. So anybody who supports Australian cricket or follows Australian cricket, please let us know. We are more than happy to talk to you about the Australian perspective. Coming to this one, it was kind of shocker that grown over me. Like initially when I saw this, I'm like, yeah, I'm in Australia. I mean, not a big deal. But when it started growing up, when the reaction started coming out, like, wow, it has become huge. And then Prime Minister of Australia commenting about it, which was like, whoa, wow. And then people completely saying, this is crazy. And that's where I'm like, oh, people don't acknowledge, like in Australia, they don't acknowledge that their team could be cheating. So that's a big thing, in my opinion. And somehow I remember during that time, there was a Reddit post that trended on the front page, and it was just ask Reddit post, which was like, what is your national's headline, like a newspaper headline of your nation? And some Australian posted, and somehow it became one of the top comments. And I was surprised, like how did it came on the front page of Reddit? Like, that means something big is happening. And then you see all these players being escorted out of South Africa airport. That
Crying.
was pretty weird. And then their press conferences where both the players crying, and even Darryl Lehman crying. I'm like, that's when you started getting the soft corner for these guys. Oh, poor guys. It's okay. Hopefully you come back. But yeah, I feel bad for Steve Smith. I know I don't feel that he was part of it, but he being the in charge, being the captain, definitely got it because it's under his control. And I don't say he should not have got it. I mean, it's his responsibility, but I feel that he's innocent enough, and he's always in his own bubble, that he didn't had a clue what's happening, and he would have probably said no to if he knew that was happening.
I'm not too sure about that. I personally think he knew what was happening, and like there's something that we need to kind of put into context, was that the culture of the Australian team at that time was very much a win at all cost mentality. They'd been ruffling feathers everywhere they went. I mean, even in that series itself, there were so many like individual incidents. For example, when AB de Villiers, Quinton de Kock and David Warner, they had a fight because of David Warner's ex-wife and a comment current wife, and a comment that was made about her being caught doing sexual things in the toilet or something like that. And then there was the incident where Nathan Lyon dropped the ball on top of AB de Villiers after running him out. And like, it just came across as cocky and arrogant from the whole Australian team. Even going back a few years, Steve Smith and the dressing review incident where he took the DRS and then looked at the dressing room to kind of figure out if he was right in making that call. There are loads of little things which kind of pissed off a lot of people from opposing countries. And what's really interesting about this is that all the Australian public were really disappointed in their team. I think perhaps maybe if it was the Indian public, we would be supporting of them, but we would also, I don't think there would be so much outrage from our own nation towards our own players if they got caught something wrong. So that was what shocked me the most, was how Australians were so angry with them.
I think the Indian public or English public would have crucified their team in the same situation. Ball tampering, there's so many different levels. There's talk in Marcus Trescothick's book about using Murray mints back in the 2005 Ashes to get extra swing. But somehow that feels less dirty, given that it's with spit rather than bringing on a piece of sandpaper to do it. I think it's that added bit of, you didn't just try and change it. It was blatant that
and
they
you
were
lied
rubbing
about
sandpaper.
The lying about it after being caught. I think that's what pissed people off.
Yeah.
I don't know. In my opinion, I think it was a known unknown, right? Everybody knew that's happening. I mean, it's like people using something or other to change the shape of the ball. And I think every team was doing it. It's not just that Australian. I think they went above and beyond to get that sandpaper on the field to just change it. I'm sure other teams, they were purposefully shine at one side and they would ignore the other side. That's one common way that most of the team, but I'm sure, no other team is innocent enough that that's not doing it. And it's just who got caught, and probably more of a backlash from the public that made this a scandal, a gate scandal, where you get a gate associated with that name.
So then what's the difference between this and a 3D biting the ball? Or, Pakistan being accused of ball tampering when they were in England, I don't remember, under Inzamam, when they just got 5 penalty runs docked. What's the difference between that? Why was this so big of a deal compared to that?
I think it's because it's something, we all shine the ball on our trousers. We, no one's going to sit there and say you've never taken a little bit off the ball. If it's been hanging a bit loose, you've maybe brushed it off. I think it was just weird. It was weird at the time, and it's weird now looking back on it. But this is, they've actively gone to the equivalent of, Home Depot in the States or B&Q here, got a chunk of sandpaper and let it, brought it onto the pitch. I think it's that foreign material is what makes it feels so wrong. Whilst most others are actively, using something that they've got on them already.
Yeah, I remember Sachin getting penalized. I don't remember what tour was it, but there was a huge backlash in support of Sachin Tendulkar when he was trying to remove grass or changing the shape of ball, whatever it is, the outcome could be. But there was a time where it was a huge backlash where Sachin was trying to clean seam of it, and the broadcaster showed a close-up video of it, and then outcome was that he was suspended for a match. And then it was outcry in support of Sachin because people argue that it was not changing, he was just cleaning, and that's too harsh for India, where Sachin was the key player to be banished, or to hand over the ban for a few matches. So I don't remember which series was it. I'll definitely look it up, but it was a different one. I think this was whole country supporting the player, and of course Sachin has a god status, so I'm sure he can get away with murder. But with Australian team, as I said, I think I was surprised. My first reaction was, that's common thing, and with Australia with being cocky and having fights and everything, I was totally expecting that's totally what Australia team would do. But when the country revolted and they were unhappy with it, they had the whole ban, Prime Minister talking, and I even saw Washington Post and US news outlet talking about it. I'm like, wow, that is growing beyond it could be contained. So maybe these guys have thought, even if we get caught, we'll get hand slapped and we'll be okay. But I don't think nobody thought this would be a huge reaction that would come out to be.
Right. So definitely a huge global incident. After it, Steve Smith said that they've never done it before. Do you believe it? I don't believe it because, he says he doesn't expect us to believe him, but I definitely think that if it wasn't sandpaper, something else was used, and obviously there was that photo of Cameron Bancroft putting, I don't know what it was it sugar in his pocket or something like that, during the Ashes. I think it was very much ingrained in that culture of the team that it was a win at all costs. Obviously now things are very much different under Tim Payne, but do you guys think that they did it before?
Yep. I think pretty undisputable. There'd been rumblings about this team for ages. I remember there was fallout in I think it was the Ashes that was previous, because David Warner has heavily strapped up hands, and there'd been suspicions that what he'd had in his hands, was influencing the ball conditions. So yes, I do, basically. And I think also, going back to why was there such a furore, I think at least David Warner, he's always been a pantomime villain, but also demonstrably questionable individual, such as punching Joe Root in the face. People were asking for a reason to get after him, and he gave, a pretty easy way to go and hammer him. And, so yes, I do think they do. Yes, I think they probably should be banned. And, demonstrably bad blokes.
Yeah, the bad boy of cricket, right? I mean, he's been always loud-mouthed, ready to fight. And again, I mean, that's probably is what the Australian way is, that you have to play with your passion. And you can see new generation across, like even in an Indian team now, a lot of aggressive team, Virat Kohli, getting actively following that same footstep. But now you'll see a lot of the nation defending their team. Like, no, this is just a passion. That's how they play.
Yeah, I think they were flirting with the line for a very long time, and that's what really pissed people off. And then all of a sudden they were like, yeah, this has definitely crossed the line. You don't get to decide where the line is, and that's it. What do you think about the bans? Do you think they were fair? Do you think it's fair for people outside of, cricket to get involved and have a say in saying, oh, they should be banned for X amount of time? I was shocked, personally, when that happened. Like, I was really impressed with how seriously they were taking it. And that was something which kind of redeemed Australia's credibility in my eyes. But yeah, what do you guys think about the ban lengths, etc.?
Yeah, I think it was a fair ban. I think they need to be, and then you can see the change in their approach after coming out of ban. Like, they have definitely changed and mellowed down at least their personal behavior. I hope they don't lose their aggression of the cricket, but that was fair, and it's not just for one person. Like, I mean, it's an example for everybody. So if they would have just given a small ban or a match fee fine, which is like a chump change for these superstars, it would have been right. For other guys, other teams, it would have been okay if they got it away. I mean, it's not a big deal for me to do the same mistake. Right now, that as an example, the remaining international players will definitely look at it and probably will think twice before doing it.
I agree that people will think twice before doing it, but the ICC ban to the players was much less than that was imposed by their own Cricket Australia. Was it Cricket Australia who imposed that, said, you can't play for X amount of time? So that's the thing which I personally feel. I don't know if they should be involved in that. I think ultimately the correct decision was reached, but yeah, I'm not sure. Surely it should be the same rule for everyone. That's the kind of counter argument to that.
The ICC punishment was much, much lower. It was the Australian Cricket Authority that took that punishment. They took it so seriously. I do wonder whether it is because they had a feeling that this culture had been building and they needed to stamp it out once and for all. And that's probably also, it's reflected in that Tim Payne, a slightly strange appointment, given that he's definitely not the best batsman or wicketkeeper batsman in Australia, whilst he is a phenomenal wicketkeeper. But he's, a really down-to-earth bloke and kind of the opposite of that culture that had been brewing the Australian side.
Yeah. Very interesting appointment at the time, as our good friend Rishabh Pant pointed out. Temporary captain, not something that we've heard of, and that kind of leads to the next point. Do you think he's made a difference, or do you think that they're just suppressing? It's just a time-gated thing where slowly they'll just go back towards their old ways.
See, I personally never felt that Steve Smith was a captain material. I remember after he became a captain, he dropped a catch, and blaming that spider cam was in its way, and then that's why he lost it. And I'm like, come on, man, own it up. That's like, you're on a national stage, everybody's looking at it up, and you dropped a catch, move on. Now, don't make any reasons that, okay, this is the reason I dropped a catch, I would have caught it. That was not a very captaincy approach, and I never felt him as a captain. I think he was one of those lucky blokes who got a great team and who was performing well while he was a captain. And there are players who don't feel they're good captains. They are great players. So I hope he stays this way. And Tim Payne, I know he's coming of age, but he's doing pretty good in captaincy. If you look at, definitely first few months was very difficult, but I think by last year, I think 2019, in Ashes, just before World Cup, also those test matches that they played, they played pretty okay. He did some good decisions, except that LBW review in the Ashes for Ben Stokes, but
That could be a very different story if he had. But
classic.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. I think he's good for their brand image, and over time, if they are genuine about changing culture, as I'm sure anyone who's studied like business knows, that it is such a huge process. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes years. It takes years because it's so embedded into everything that is going on. And I'm sure that Cricket Australia and Australian cricket had a very strong culture. If they are changing it, and it looks like they are, then that's it's going to take a while. And maybe not even 2 years, maybe 5 years down the line, we'll see what a reformed Australia looks like properly.
Tim Payne was quoted this week as saying that he'd back Steve Smith to take the captaincy. But I think from a non-Australian perspective, that'd be concerning for the culture going forward, whether they would slip back, because there are still those characters like David Warner in the team. Wikipedia was early this week, actually.
See, Steve Smith, and I don't know if you have seen that test documentary or not, but he is so much like self-centered cricketer where you basically are in a bubble and you focus on your thing. And I think Sachin Tendulkar was also in the same criteria. I mean, he had such a high standard of being a player. And I read about Sachin as a captain was that he was disappointed in other players who would not give the best like he used to do, and he did not know how to communicate that to the players, so that this is the effort and this is the energy you need. So it was difficult for him being as a captain, and everybody knows he was not a great successful captain, Sachin Tendulkar. And I feel it's going to be same for Steve Smith. I mean, if he gets the addition responsibilities of captaincy, there would be certain greatness that he probably will miss. He is on a path of being one of the greatest batsmen of all time, like Sachin, like Don Bradman, along with Virat Kohli. So don't hate me for that. But he is on a path, and then he probably will. It might get impact, and that's my personal opinion, if he gets the additional responsibility of being captain.
Yeah, I agree. He is a fantastic player, and I think that since post the whole Sandpapergate, he's gone another level, right? I was convinced after that his confidence would be so low that he wouldn't be able to be the same. But he's definitely proven me wrong in terms of my thought process. He's even better than he was before, and I think like not being captain probably gets the best version out of him for Australia. Probably in their best interest to find someone else, but they don't have anyone else, right? That's the issue. They can't put David Warner as captain. Tim Payne is getting old, and what's the alternative for them? So that's the issue, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. Like, who is there? There has been I remember when Steve Waugh was captain, they were training Ricky Ponting to be taking over, and when Ricky Ponting was, they were training Michael Clarke. So that has always been the criteria. I think they're not finding a good candidate right now who can take over. So hopefully that could be resolved pretty soon, and we get a great player out of him.
There's some discussion of Travis Head, but he's not a nailed-on starter. I think he's the youngest state captain,
right?
Possibly in Australian history. So whether or not he's been groomed for it, but I think he needs more runs on the board before he gets considered even as a permanent fixture of the Australian team, let alone captain.
Yeah. Well, I think Sandpapergate has been pretty well discussed. For sure, it's changed Australian cricket forever. If you guys haven't seen the documentary, there's a documentary by Supersport on YouTube on the whole Sandpapergate saga, and it covers the whole test with South Africa and Australia, and it's actually fascinating. It goes into lots of detail about the pre-Sandpapergate events between David Warner being an idiot and Nathan Lyon, and that just kind of the cockiness that the Australians had. It's actually fascinating. So big recommendation.
Definitely watch it. I've not heard about it, but yep. There goes my weekend.
So I think that kind of covers it for Sandpapergate. This week has been a pretty interesting podcast. We talked a lot about that statistics post about test match averages, and we looked at that beautiful shitpost of Ravi Ashwin. And yeah, I think it's been a pretty nice podcast. If you guys enjoyed it, please let us know. If you have any feedback, of course, please do give it to us. We are still in the very early stages. This podcast is focused on the subreddit. So, you guys are as involved as we are. And please feel free to join our Discord. We're still looking for maybe a couple more people to be regular hosts. And, if you want to help out, that'll be amazing. So thank you very much for listening. This is Innings Break, not Night Watchman. Innings Break, by the way. Signing out, so I'll just hand over to Wicketkeeper and Mr. Angry Lettuce to say goodbye.
Thank you, everybody who's listening, and hopefully we could hear most of you on our podcast. Everybody is welcome. And as Raf said, we are looking for your feedback. Please let us know. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Stay safe.
Indeed. Stay safe, guys, and goodbye. Take care.